Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, it is show number 2 in our series on rewatching Tennessee's games from this year to learn more about their team. And it feels like every time we do one of these, show 1 starts really wide, like, well, Tony, they wear orange jerseys, but sometimes they wear white jerseys when they're not playing home. And usually they use a quarterback. And then by the time you get to the last one, it's like, sometimes the holder spins the ball just slightly too much. Yeah, like, oh boy, you get really granular. So we're in show 2 of 4, but it feels like every time we do one of these shows, it's like on those TV network dramas where it's just like you have the first show and you go enhance, and then you zoom in a little bit more, and then you say enhance. And so we're on the first enhance here. So looking forward to talking Georgia and Tennessee.
Yeah, definitely. And you talk about this 30,000-foot view. Before I watch the game, I like to look at the box score and see if the outcome matches like all of the things that happened. And when I was looking at this one, knowing going in, no spoilers, but Tennessee loses this one 31-17. Georgia ends up winning. But I'm going through like the different stats, and one of them was Tennessee was 10 of 18 on third down conversions. And I'm thinking, I don't know that you should lose by 14 points when you're 10 of 18 on third downs, but Tennessee managed to do that. And then it just goes from there. So you look at the way that Georgia threw the ball around in this one was also catches your eye right away. Carson Beck, people may remember him, 25 of 40 for 347 yards, 2 touchdowns. And also, Tom, ran the ball 3 times for 32 yards and a touchdown. I was surprised, and I'll just start out by saying, I'll say that. I was surprised at how effective he was running the ball against Tennessee's defense, and the fact that he got pressured a little bit, but he never got sacked. And when he did run, because Tennessee's in this main coverage and they're all turning and running, he had some room to go, and he was able to make some hay in that game. And so almost 400 total yards for him, 369 total yards of offense for him. That was everything I saw there. Thinking I could see Will Howard doing this. And the thing is, Carson Beck, he did not have a very good game. He was 25 of 40. He threw a lot of bad passes that were to open receivers, and he also had some drops from open and covered receivers. This could have been much, much worse for Tennessee. The secondary was attacked, and I know I started the first show about the Alabama game, talking about how much I really liked Will Brooks, their safety. He was exposed in this one. He had some issues in coverage, specifically against tight end Oscar Delp, who caught 4 passes for 56 yards. The other tight end, Ben Urasek, 5 catches for 51 yards. Like, they were attacking this Tennessee secondary very, very effectively.
Yeah, it was a huge game for the Georgia tight end room in particular. It's amazing you throw for 347 yards and your top 2 receivers in terms of receptions are both tight ends. That's not an easy thing to do, but Oscar Delp, in addition to the five catches you mentioned, 2 of them for touchdowns, both in the first half. It felt like he was really kind of picking on Will Brooks a little bit. I mean, Brooks, as you said the last game, he's one of the best players on the team. He's statistically one of the best players on the team. He just did not have a great game here. I was trying to figure out who in the Ohio State tight end room is kind of the most similar to Oscar Delp. Maybe it's G. Scott. I don't know how much this really carries over in terms of like, this is a very logical, boy, if Oscar Delp can do this, then fill in the blank can do this for Ohio State. Maybe it's G. Scott. We really haven't seen that much from Will Kazmarek this year, but obviously he missed a big chunk of the season. But what really struck me was, as you said, Carson Beck did not have a great game. The Georgia receivers did not have a great game.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia receivers are just not as Georgia receivers and Alabama receivers. Outside of Ryan Williams from Alabama, there is not a receiver in either of those rooms that's starting at Ohio State. And so for Georgia to be able to throw for 347 yards without really being able to run the ball very well. Nate Frazier ran for 3.6 yards per carry. They really didn't run the ball well, but they threw the ball fine, even without having great receivers. But it very clearly, first play of the game, that was the game plan, was throw the ball and throw the ball deep. Very first play of the game, Carson Beck throws one way downfield. I mean, 35, 40 yards downfield to Arian Smith, who is an absolute drop machine. Carson Beck is an automatic turnover machine, and Arian Smith is an automatic drop machine. And of course, he dropped it. But they were going right after Ricky Gibson, first play of the game. And we mentioned him last show, just briefly. Number one, not, Jamad McCoy, the best corner that Tennessee has. Everyone else is like fine. But if you're going to play find the fish with this Tennessee secondary, I'm looking Ricky Gibson's way. He gave up a touchdown in the Alabama game. Should have given up another touchdown, had a really flagrant holding / DPI that didn't get called that would have probably prevented another touchdown. And then immediately Georgia goes after him again. Jamad McCoy had kind of an up and down game in this one. There was one where he tried to lay a hit on a receiver and just sort of like threw his body into him and didn't knock him down, and that turned into like a 38-yard gain. But then the next play, Ricky Gibson, who I just talked about as being not very good, made this really nice play coming off of one wide receiver to break up a pass, attempted for another one. He had another one like it later in the game against Arian Smith in the third quarter. And then McCoy, who is their good corner, he got called for a really obvious and like wildly unnecessary pass interference call right before halftime, and then nearly picked off the very next pass in the end zone. And then right after that, they had a miscommunication, and Boo Carter got just lit on fire by Carson Beck threw to someone. I don't remember who it was, but there's a receiver wide open in the end zone just with a miscommunication. So it was just kind of a weird and disjointed game for Tennessee secondary, where you saw them look pretty good for the most part against Alabama. And then against Georgia, it was like sometimes they looked like, oh boy, these guys are really good. And sometimes it was like, oh boy, have these guys played football before?
Well, even at the end of the game, Georgia's up by 7. And they could try to run out the clock in the fourth quarter, but they're still throwing the ball because they know that's the more effective way to move the ball down and get that insurance touchdown. And it worked. They're still throwing the ball around with 5 minutes to go or whatever, 6, 7, 8 minutes to go, where a lot of teams would be like, let's run some clock and see what we can get, and then we'll rely on the defense. And that's not what Georgia was doing. They trusted Carson Beck, and I think there's reason to feel like you're going to move the ball better through the air than on the ground against Tennessee. One, Georgia, their running game is... Have the average fan out there, anybody out there try to name a Georgia running back, and they're not there like they have been in the past. And so, they average 3.4 yards per carry in this game. Georgia, 8.7 yards per attempt, 13.9 yards per pass completion. So yeah, the best way to ensure that you get that last touchdown is to throw the ball. And they did, and credit Carson Beck for staying safe with it, but being effective with it. And even on the last play, they just felt good about their passing game, which tells you how they felt about the Tennessee secondary, in my opinion. And the pass protection was there throughout the game. And I didn't chart it, but Tennessee I don't think they sent more than 4 guys very often. Like I didn't notice a lot of blitzing in this one. And even when I started watching for it, there wasn't a lot of blitzing. So I think they tried to play coverage, and it didn't work.
No, it didn't really work at all. And, James Pierce, we talked a bunch about James Pierce on the last show, and he had moments where he flashed, but it was a little more few and far between in this one. There was one right before halftime where he ran a stunt, and it was like he was a defensive end, and he ended up making a tackle on the other side of both defensive tackles, and it might have even been a TFL. Like he got around so quickly to get the running back in the backfield, but it wasn't. There was not the kind of pass pro or pass rush that you saw against Alabama, and just the consistent running for your life that you saw from Jalen Milroe. Carson Beck had a little more time back there. The other thing you mentioned, Georgia throwing on that last drive. The really interesting thing to me was Georgia's got the ball. They're up a touchdown with, 8 minutes left, give or take, and they're running hurry up, which is normally you think that's okay. Get under center, hand the ball to the running back, run it between the tackles just so he doesn't accidentally run out of bounds, and keep that clock moving, and run the play clock down to 2. And Not at all. Georgia used tempo throughout the game. We saw that out of Alabama on the last show. Same thing here. They used tempo very effectively against Tennessee, got the Tennessee defense a little bit on its heels. They you saw that Carson Beck change the cadence a couple times and get Tennessee to jump that way, use motion, and that got Tennessee out of position, and you snap and they were kind of out of position. It was just very, very, you could just tell tempo seems to really impact Tennessee's defense in a way. It impacts everyone to some degree. Tennessee feels like they're a little bit more vulnerable to it for whatever reason in what they do. And we talked about that a little bit on the last show, where they'll sort of shift and move around a little late. And sometimes you can kind of catch them without them being down in their stance. So that's probably part of it. There were also, I don't know what it is. Like, you don't see that many fake injuries in the Big Ten for whatever reason. Man, oh man. Like, to the point that the broadcast is calling out, like, this kid is obviously not hurt. Look at him, look at the sideline, and then drop like he's been shot from a sniper in the upper deck. It just, like, very obvious fake injuries to try and slow down that tempo, which is a good way to tell that they're getting bothered by it. My favorite moment of the game, as far as that goes, though, Tony, was Georgia subbed. Tennessee brought in a sub to, you were allowed to sub. You were allowed to sort of respond to the offensive subs. And then it was, I think, a defensive tackle coming off the field, and boy, was he taking his time. He was really taking his time. And the officials kind of just finally went like, yeah, man, you've had enough time. Backed up. Georgia snapped it, and 12 men on the field for Tennessee.
Yeah, and as he's just like slowly jogging, like the sideline, the Georgia sideline is like, you need to hurry because they're going to snap this and we're going to get busted. The best faked injury was the game before that we talked about. We didn't mention this one against Alabama, where I think it was an Alabama player that was coming off the sideline and they pushed him back onto the field so that he would go down with an injury. And then they got flagged for that. But that one was, we hear all of the talk in the SEC about all of these faked injuries and how they're going to have to do something about it. I can understand. I've seen 2 games and it's ridiculous. I'm telling you, the Alabama one, he runs off the sideline and there's still some confusion about who should be out there. One of the coaches just literally pushes him back on the field and then he collapses. Like, I don't know if it was a sniper or what, but he went down. And I think, I don't know if it was Fowler, or I don't know if that they were doing that game, but they missed that fact and like, oh, somebody's down. There must have been a collision. Well, a collision of sorts, but not a real collision. So yes, the faked injuries. I don't know that we'll see that in this game because it would require Ohio State to do some tempo and for Tennessee to want to hide the or want to slow things down. There's a lot of areas I can go, Tom, but let's go to this one, which is somewhat here and there, but neither. The temperature, we don't know what it's going to be in Ohio Stadium when these two teams play, but it's probably going to be in the low 30s, high 20s by the time the game kicks off. There was a sideline report in this game, and I don't know if you saw this part. The receivers' bench warmer thing broke, and they had to take the running backs heater so that the wide receivers could get warm. The temperature was 55 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So granted, they've been practicing outside. The blood is thickened up, I'm sure, since this game in the middle of October. But I know Josh Heupel's talked about, hey, we played in 30-degree weather at Vanderbilt last week. I hope Tennessee's blood is thickened up, or at least their wide receivers, because if you need heated benches at 55 degrees, maybe you hit the portal for South Florida and choose to go somewhere warmer.
You started talking about the bench, and I was thinking, you know how when the headset communications go down for one team, the other team has to stop using them.
Hey.
Like it would be really funny if one team's bench, the heated bench went down, and you had the other team had to. Sorry, we have to turn off our heated benches until their heated bench starts working again. I mean, I think that's only good sportsmanship there. Yeah, that game was November 16th. So for Ohio State fans, that was the same day as the Ohio State Northwestern games. That was pretty late in the season. And, that's down in Georgia. So that's, you're a little further south. So that is probably pretty cold for the folks down there. But yeah, it's going to be, I just checked the forecast, as of right now, and of course, Tony, we know forecasts never change.
Yes.
The forecast for Saturday, December 21st in Columbus, high of 41, morning low clouds, followed by clouds, yielding to sun. The real feel high is 38. So yeah, you figure kickoff is about 3 hours after sunset. So you figure it's probably starting in the low 30s, probably, maybe getting into the high 20s by the end of the game. So not really, honestly, not too bad for that time of year, and no significant precipitation chance in there. And even the wind was not particularly heavy. The wind was gusting to 22, but average wind of 8 miles an hour. So, for that time of year, that time of night, that's really about as good as Tennessee could reasonably hope for weather-wise. I don't think the weather's going to be as big of a factor, which, when you look at Ohio State's offense, that's probably not a bad thing for Ohio State, because Tennessee's, we'll get to Tennessee's offense in a little bit, but Tennessee is probably, if forward passing was outlawed, Tennessee would probably benefit more from that than Ohio State. So, that's probably good news for Tennessee weather-wise.
I want to say one thing. They described it as a breezy 55 degrees, and I'm looking at the official weather on the box score itself. It was clear, 55 degrees. The wind was out of the south, 1 mile per hour. But it's just a funny footnote.
That is technically a breeze, I guess, in the most specific way. I suppose that is technically a breeze. Yes. Let's see. I have a separate note about Georgia using motion to get Tennessee into bad matchups. They did that a bunch. Like I talked about them earlier, using it to get guys to shift and all that kind of stuff. But normally you have to really pay close attention. There were a bunch of times that they were just calling it out of the broadcast, like, oh, look, they use motion, and then now he's matched up on a safety or a linebacker instead of being on a corner, and so that's I'm sure something that Ohio State's going to try and take advantage of, because they are very comfortable taking Jeremiah Smith and moving him from outside into the slot, or moving Emeka Ibuka from the slot back outside. They don't care at all. They will move guys around. That's something definitely to keep an eye on. Just running through the rest of my notes real quick on the defensive side of the ball. Again, Tim Banks leaving the corners on islands, and just so many times you'd see Carson Beck throw the ball downfield, and just over and over again, they couldn't take advantage. They had one-on-one matchups, and over again, they couldn't take advantage. And again, I had the same thought I had while I was watching the Alabama game was, man, this is a great game plan for Tennessee. They are really trying to get Georgia to do stuff they don't want to do. They know Ohio State's going to want to do this. I really do wonder how much the defensive game plan against Alabama and Georgia is going to reflect what the defensive game plan is against Ohio State. I think you're going to see one fewer guy in the box, see those safeties playing a little deeper. It just feels to me like we're watching all these games. We're like, man, I learned so much about Tennessee's defense. I don't know if any of it's going to apply at all when they play Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, because as aggressively as they do play, and they're not always pressed, they'll back off as well. But one of my notes here is just Ohio State's wide receivers greater than Georgia's wide receivers. And you can say the same thing about Alabama. So you can't defend them the same way. And so do you keep more guys back? And because I'll tell you what, if Will Howard looks and he sees Jeremiah Smith against either anybody one-on-one or Cornell Tate, and you don't take advantage of that, or if that's not just an immediate, okay, we're gonna go this way, then you're helping out Tennessee, and you should never do anything to help out the opponent's defense. And you've got to give him that freedom to take advantage of things like that, or to make use of your weapons, as Ryan Day has said this past week. They need to use their receivers more and use their outside guys more. And when you see how much Alabama threw the ball 45 times and they ran it, 30-something. Georgia in this one threw the ball 40 times, ran it 31. And clearly the best way to move the ball is against the Tennessee defense through the air. And tempo is key there, as we've said. A couple of times the tempo, as you said, led to offside penalties. They were called for 3 offside penalties. 2 were declined because they picked up a 38-yard pass on one and a 23-yard on another on these hard claps. And we saw it in the Alabama game. Like, this defensive line, it's just jittery. It's like, I don't know if the Gatorade is spiked, not that they drink Gatorade, maybe Powerade at Tennessee, but they're too caffeinated basically. And they're kind of like constant motion. You want to be like, calm down, but they will jump off sides. And when they do, throw it up, go get some yards there. But we did see them create some matchups with, we saw with Oscar Delp and Will Banks, and they took advantage of that. You see Carson Beck make some really bad throws, and then he throws like a perfect touchdown pass to Delp in triple coverage, like down the seam. And you're like, well, I guess that's why he was formerly a first round prospect. And then you see some of the other throws that he makes, and you're like, yeah, I can see why they struggled this year. But overall, like this could have been worse than the 31-17 that it was, and Georgia gets their last touchdown towards the end of the fourth quarter. But I think my last thing as I'm looking through this for the Tennessee defense is, they did bat some passes down to the line of scrimmage, so that was good. One of my notes here: Tennessee stayed in this because of drops and bad throws, and I think that's fact.
Well, I have already watched the first half of the Arkansas game. If you think opponent keeps Tennessee in the game is a big thing in the Georgia game, oh friend, just you wait for the first half of the Tennessee-Arkansas game. But I had the exact same note about Tennessee batting passes down at the line of scrimmage where they weren't getting a ton of pressure, but that defensive line is still really impactful. They had at least 2, maybe 3 passes they knocked down, and another one where you kind of got a finger on it and just caused enough of a slowdown that it threw the timing off. The other thing that I had was Jackson Moy, defensive tackle. We haven't talked about him yet all on these shows. He had an incredible effort play. He's like a 300-pound guy. He chased down Arian Smith from an angle from behind and punched the ball out. Now, I think Georgia fell on it. I don't think it actually counted, it was a turnover, but it was like, that was a fantastic effort play there where you don't think of once you throw it out to a fast wide receiver, usually the defensive tackles are like, well, hope the fast guys can tackle him. That was like incredible hustle there. I think that's it for me on the defense. So
and Smith might be one of the fastest players in the nation too. So that was impressive.
Yeah.
I believe he recovered his own fumble, basically dribbled it.
Yeah. On the other side of the ball, I feel like we've been overly negative, which is a game they lost. So sure. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Dylan Sampson again. This is one of these things where we've seen 2 games and it's already like, okay, I have a good idea who Dylan Sampson is, and who he is really hard to get to the ground, because there were a couple times when he just sort of like ran into a crowd, and then all of a sudden he like just pops out the other side. There was one where it looked like Georgia had him bobble up for like a 4-yard loss, and he just sort of like just put his foot in the ground, cut back, and turned it into a 5-yard gain. So instead of 2nd and 14, it was 2nd and 5. That's a huge deal. Pile mover, it was 3rd and 2. It looked like it had him stopped, turns it into a first down. He had a 27-yard touchdown right up the gut just before halftime. He is really, really good. And this is the first time we got to see Peyton Lewis. Peyton Lewis did not play in the Alabama game for some reason. Backup running back. He was running hard. He was breaking tackles. He also looks like he's hard to bring down. The 2 of them, Dylan Sampson, 19 carries for 101 yards and a touchdown, 5.3 yards per carry. Peyton Lewis, 6 carries, 30 yards, 5 yards a carry. 25 carries, 131 yards and a touchdown. You'll take that if you're, that's it. Those are good solid numbers, just over 5 yards a carry between the 2 of them. We said this on the last show. My opinion has not changed. You've got to get the running backs down to the ground. You've got to be. Ohio State was really, really, really good in tackling against Michigan in the run game. Really almost didn't miss a tackle all game long, and then missed one at the very end, and that led to the game-winning field goal. They have to be every bit as good as that, if not better, again against Tennessee, because Tennessee, Dylan Sampson, he is going to make you pay if you miss a tackle.
I would be pretty shocked in this one if he only has 19 carries. And the more carries he has, almost regardless of what he does with them, like if it's 3 yards a carry or 6 yards a carry, if he's got 25, 27 carries, that's going to be bad news for Ohio State, because that means they're establishing things They're getting first downs. Michigan, death by 1,000 cuts with their running game against Ohio State. They would take 2 and 3 yards all day long because they know it would eventually lead to something more, and it would wear down the defense. And if you get 2 yards turns into 3, 3 turns into 4, and now you've got a short third down. And Dylan Sampson, the previous game against Alabama, 1 carry that was for negative yards. It was a 1 yard loss. This game, he was not stopped in the backfield at all. In fact, I think all of those carries went for yardage. Like, I don't even think he had a 0 in there. So, and Peyton Lewis is a freshman who has got some explosion to him. So again, 152 yards rushing for Tennessee against Georgia. Like, Georgia doesn't normally do that, and this is not the same Georgia defense as we've seen in the past. But they established the run. And again, they run the ball more than they throw it. 39 rushes, 33 passes, and they will run the ball as much as it takes against Ohio State. And it's going to be the most plodding up-tempo attack that maybe you've ever seen with the running of Dylan Sampson. It was just like, I'll just get 6 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards, and I'll be perfectly happy. And then, boom, once I do break in the open, when he hit that 27-yarder, he was gone. And he showed some impressive speed, and I know he's got a nose for the end zone. And hey, you even had a tight end running for a touchdown in this one, and Miles Kitzelman on the goal line. So they get creative with some of the stuff they do. With Nico Iamaleava in the Alabama game, we charted his passes downfield, the throwing distance. And in that game, he was 7 of 17 passing on throws 10 yards or more downfield. He was 4 of 10 in this game, to give you an idea of how much less he threw the ball downfield in this one. In fact, he only threw 1 pass more than 20 yards downfield. It was an incompletion, and not counting, maybe there's a pass interference or a penalty in there somewhere else. But against Alabama, he threw the ball, I think, 40 yards or more downfield, 38 yards or more downfield 4 or 5 times, to give you an idea of the way they viewed Alabama's defense and the way they viewed Georgia's defense. And my question to you, Tom, how do they view Ohio State's defense? And is it going to be more of the Georgia attack for Tennessee's offense, or is it going to be more of the Alabama attack for Tennessee's offense? Do you expect them to go more downfield, or does it just depend on how those tackles hold up? Because they did not hold up well in this game.
No, they didn't. And I think the pass pro is certainly going to be one element of it. But also, what is Ohio State doing on offense? Is Ohio State throwing the ball downfield with some success, and Tennessee's going to have to match that? Or is this going to be a close, low-scoring game? Because if it's the more Ohio State scores, the more Tennessee's going to have to throw. I think Tennessee, if they had their druthers, would run the ball as much as they can, because that's where their strength lies. Their running game is better than their passing game. In this game, their running backs ran for 5.24 yards per carry, and they averaged 5.06 yards per pass attempt. Per pass attempt should be in the 7, 8 range at least. 5 yards per pass attempt is bad. That is, you're completing a relatively low percentage of your passes, and it was 20 for 33 in this one, but for only 167 yards. And the leading receiver in terms of targets and receptions was Squirrel White. 9 targets, 6 catches, 45 yards. You're averaging 5 yards when you throw the ball to him every time. And they just did not have any kind of real downfield passing attack, like you said. They did take the one downfield shot to Chris Brazzell on the first drive, and it was not a great throw, but the corner from Georgia panicked and just kind of did the grab and clutch, and oh no, something bad's about to happen, and the something bad was he got called for pass interference. So, you get a little bit there, but really, for the most part, it was running the ball, and then Iamaleava does present a threat on the ground. We talked about this in the last show. In this one, there was a 3rd and 8 in the red zone where, you'd normally think, boy, there's not a lot of room to run. He picked up a 3rd and 8 on just running the ball. If he gets in the open field, he is a big problem when he can just sort of turn into a long strider. His long in this one was only 11 yards, but he had a long one against Alabama where he just got into the open field and ran. But if you can get pressure on him, if he's back in the pocket and you can kind of rush responsibly, talked about this on the last show as well. If you can kind of keep him contained, he hangs onto the ball way too much. And when he finally gets rid of it, it's generally not a great decision. There was one where Georgia ran an overload blitz and someone was coming clean and he just either he looked like he saw it and he just didn't recognize it quickly enough, took a sack. But then, man, when he gets out there and he's out in the open field, when he's trying to extend plays, when he's trying to make a play with his legs, he takes a ton of hits. Both games we've watched, it's been like, man, this kid is getting just beat to crap. And that has to affect you during the course of the game. Yeah, he's coming in. He's been in a no contact jersey for probably 3 weeks going into this game. So he's probably healthier than he's been all year. But man, he takes a lot of shots. And you saw him have to come out of the Alabama game for one play because of an injury. And it's like, boy, there at least 2 or 3 times a game, you see him take a hit and you're like, ooh, is he getting up? And he's tough, so he usually does. But man, I don't know that that's a good way to live life.
Yeah, he's listed at 6'6", 215, and he looks like he's about 6'6", 185. He's a thin frame, but he does take some hits and he keeps going. And so respect there. But yeah, the ability to keep plays alive, and he got hit in this game quite a bit. 12 rushes, 5 of those were sacks. So basically 7 rushes on his own for 40 yards. The previous game against Alabama, it was like 6 for 60. So he will pick up yards and he will pick up third downs. He will pick up first downs, whatever. It was interesting. There was one play where Georgia had 2 guys basically spying him, like waiting for him to come out on a third down or something, like we're waiting, come try to scramble. And he didn't. One of the last things for me is something that I noticed throughout this game is that it got pretty easy to tell when Tennessee's going to throw the ball because either one or both of their tackles, their left tackle and right tackle, are nearly in the backfield. Like they're not on the line of scrimmage. It's almost too many men in the backfield that I know people that watch the NFL and watch Kansas City Chiefs will see tons of argument about their alignments. It's not that bad, but you can tell it's almost like a flying V when they're going to throw the ball because the tackles are getting ready for the pass rush. And they're basically telling the defensive ends, get ready to pass rush because we're already waiting for you. And then when they're all flat and up on the line of scrimmage, that's generally a run or an RPO, which is, blocking it as a run. And then that's Nico deciding to throw take the numbers and throw the ball. But when you look at it, it could be first down and 10, it could be 2nd and 2, it could be 3rd and 10 or whatever. You can basically tell when they're going to be throwing the ball by the alignment of the tackles. And I didn't watch that in the Alabama game. I'll be watching that in the Arkansas game to see if that holds true there. But it was just something that was interesting to me.
Yeah, and that's typically the kind of thing that they will identify. You've got QC guys who are doing self-scout. You would assume that that's the kind of thing they probably picked up on at some point. I'll be interested to go watch. I think we're going to try and do the Vanderbilt game as well, just because it's the most recent game that Tennessee's played. That would be after this Georgia game, so we'll see if that's something maybe they picked up on self-scout and have corrected already. But yeah, that's definitely the kind of tip-off that can make a significant difference if it's not corrected. A couple other things. We talked about the Vanderbilt receivers. Dante Thompson had a wide open reception. It hit him right in the hands and he just dropped it. He had two targets, 0 catches in this game. He's the one that averages 25 yards per catch. So if he doesn't catch the ball, that is a big bonus for you. Squirrel White mentioned he was the leading receiver in this game. He had a long pass down the middle that he couldn't quite get to the ground. He did have a great catch early in the third quarter of this game where he went up and had to reach way behind him. It was not a good throw. He reached way behind him and made a nice catch there, but just not super consistent out of the Tennessee wide receivers. Last thing to mention is I always like to look at, how does the coaching staff handle 4th down decision-making?
Ooh.
They were pretty conservative on one against Alabama. They were pretty conservative. This one, they went on it on 4th and 2 from the plus 37 with 3:25 left in the first half. They were down 14-10. They made that one, I believe. That's a pretty standard time when you're going to go where you're kind of in no man's land. They punted on 4th and 6 at the plus 36 with 13:02 left in the game. And when it was tied at 17, again, that's kind of defensible. It's, there are coaches who are going to go for it to prove a point. You only gain 20 something yards of field position there by punting it. So is that really worth at 4th and 6, it's not 4th and 15 or anything like that. So punting from the plus 36 is not ideal necessarily. They also, one last thing on the special teams, Max Gilbert, talked about him. He was 1 for 3 on field goals against Alabama with 2 misses outside 50. He hit a 52-yard field goal here in this game. He was very, very streaky this year. He at one point was 1 for 7, including the Alabama game, and missing 3 against Kentucky. And they went 4 for 4 against Mississippi State and then hit a 52-yarder in this one. So he's just kind of all over the place. It's one of those things where, hashtag college kickers, it doesn't always mean they miss. It just means they're like wildly unpredictable. And he seems like he is pretty hashtag college kickers.
I am surprised that Josh Heupel is not as aggressive on 4th down, because you think of him as this offensive guru, and it's like he may be, and he's had some really good offenses at Tennessee, but he was not aggressive at all on 4th downs in this one, and he could have been more aggressive, but he wasn't. The last thing I have is I have not really seen. Excuse me. It's emotional thinking about it. Really haven't seen anything or much of anything from the Tennessee linebackers to this point. Like, they've not really jumped out. They've not, I don't know that, again, I haven't seen a lot of blitzing. So like Cody Simon will blitz and you'll see it. You're like, oh, I've seen him. I know him now. He's made a play, middle linebacker for Ohio State. But really, like, they had the entire defense in this one had 2 tackles for loss, and one was James Pierce and the other one was Bryson Eason. And you don't really notice the linebackers in this one, or in the previous game. Like, I'm waiting for somebody to stand out and be like, oh, okay. Because I remember doing this for the Georgia in 2022 when Ohio State was playing Georgia. And again, different defenses. But you saw linebackers in that one standing out. You saw people standing out. Like, I'm waiting for more of that here, and really have not seen much of that.
Yeah, and you see the linebackers on the other team. Smile Munden made a play for Georgia in this game. And the only Tennessee linebacker who I can name off the top of my head right now is Keenan Peely. And he tore his ACL, and they showed him on the sideline at the Alabama game, and he's out for the season. That's the only Tennessee linebacker that I have in my notes for either of the first 2 games. The defense is good. They've got, we've talked about a bunch of guys in the secondary who are good. The defensive line has been very good. It's just kind of anonymous in the linebackers, and it's against a couple different offenses. So it's not just, sometimes the linebackers, when you're playing Army, your linebackers are going to be the stars of the game. And it's it could be a little bit schematic, but they just haven't been talked about. They haven't really been that noticeable. I'll have to watch the rest of the Arkansas game, and then of course we'll get another one in at some point. But yeah, it just feels like they're not that impactful. I can pull up the defensive stats and see.
Arian Carter had 4 tackles. And he's their leading tackler on the year, but he averages, 5 or 6, and doesn't necessarily get into the backfield much. And Jeremiah Talander was their other starter, and he had 1 tackle, and it's just, I'm waiting to see more, I guess. And yet, they're really good against the run. So
Well, and Arian Carter, you do see Arian Carter out there quite a bit, even downfield in the pass game. So you do see him. So I should include him in that conversation.
And Boo Carter, who's like their star Sam nickel type of guy, you see him as well. But like, I'm waiting to see more plays made rather than I've tackled you now 6 yards downfield.
Yeah, Boo Carter had the one where it looked like there was just a mix-up in coverage, and he ended up sort of being the guy who was closest, but no one was particularly close on the 1 touchdown. And he also had a really nice punt return in this game. He had like a 20-something yard punt return in this game as well that we should mention.
Yeah, and they can return punts, so that's something Ohio State will have to be aware of. Ohio State's covered punts pretty well because they don't have the leg to outkick their coverage, so that kind of helps. The rest of the return game, I'm not, kickoff returns don't exist anymore, so I wouldn't expect that to be a factor. Tom, anything else before we go?
I think that covers it for this game, and we'll get into more with the Arkansas game. And I know Tennessee fans are going, we only lost 2 games all year. Why are you doing the 2 losses back? Don't worry, we'll get back to a win. We're trying. No one cares what happened against Kent State. If you were doing this, no one would care about what Ohio State did against Akron. You'd be looking at the Oregon game, you'd be looking at the Michigan game, you'd be looking at the Penn State game, like the Indiana game. Like these are the games that are relevant. No one cares what you did against Mississippi State. No one cares what Ohio State did against Purdue.
No, we're going to look at matchup games and also Vanderbilt. So, I mean, Vanderbilt is good enough to beat Alabama, but then so is Tennessee. So, but yeah, looking forward to checking those two out as well. So before you go, if you could hit the thumbs up, if you're watching on YouTube, we would appreciate that. Hit the bell to be notified when we drop more videos or go live. We will be going live quite a bit throughout the course of this stretch of days before the game. And then of course the game itself and everything that follows. And of course, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up first month, just $4.99. Tennessee fans, you are more than welcome to stop on by and be treated as well as you treat others. I'll say that. No, it's a good community. I promise you'll be okay. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.